Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Coach Sark, the Texas Longhorns continue to do work in the transfer portal, going out and grabbing Arizona defensive lineman Tiaoalii Savea. And this is kind of following the narrative that we've talked about with Coach Sark in the transfer portal for the last couple of weeks. He is not going to the transfer portal and really overturning this roster to any significant extent. I think he's taken a look at what made this Texas team really good in 2023, taking a look at what pieces they are losing heading into 2024 and addressing those concerns in the transfer portal and losing guys like T'Vondre Sweat and Murphy. You kind of want to add some big bodies on that inside of the defensive line, again, that are really good against the run. And a guy like Tiaoalii Savea certainly checks that box, went and back, watched a little bit of what he did at Arizona, took a look at some of his numbers, really impressed. And this is one of those gets that might fly under the radar because it might not be as splashy as a guy like Isaiah Bond, but a guy that's going to come into Texas in 2024 and really make a difference. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys. A shout out to the Texas fans. I mean, this is a program that over the last couple of weeks, it has absolutely crushed the transfer portal. It's been a blast talking about Coach Sark, his approach in the portal, these players coming into Texas. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I first want to talk about what made this Texas defense so dominant in 2023, and a largely unit that I think flew under the radar because you had guys like Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell kind of getting a lot of the spotlight. This Texas defense allowing 18.9 points per game, 12th best in the country. And you look back at that Texas defense and say, what made it so special? And I think it starts with what they had up front and what they were able to do against the run. Only allowing 2.9 yards per carry. That was 5th best in the country. Only 82.6 rushing yards per game. That was number 3 in the country. And this front seven, specifically this defensive line for Texas in 2023, I think really set them apart. And so you look at losing guys like T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, two guys who, I mean, it's very hard to replace those caliber of players, two of the more dominant interior defensive linemen we saw in college football. A guy like Tiaoalii Savea is certainly going to help that transition into 2024. You take a look at what he brought to Arizona on defense. He's a hammer against the run. And I think that's what Texas was looking for. Again, kind of checking those boxes, right? Coach Sark looking at this roster and saying, all right, we lost a lot of really talented wide receivers. We go out and get a guy like Golden, like Isaiah Bond, like Silas Bolden. We lose a guy like JT Sanders. You go out and get Amari Niblack from Alabama. Looking at this roster, saying, where do we need to replace talent? That's how they're using the transfer portal. In my opinion, that's how you should be using the transfer portal. And I think they looked at this inside of that defensive line and say, hey, we got to add some of those bodies so we can continue dominating against the run. And a guy like Tiaoalii Savea certainly brings that to the table. You take a look at what he did against the run for Arizona in 2023. I haven't really seen these numbers, right? An average depth of tackle against the run of negative 0.9 yards per carry. His average depth of tackle was 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage. And to kind of put that in comparison, a guy like Murphy was 0.7, a guy like T'Vondre Sweat was 0.4. Those are phenomenal numbers, right? Making your plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. Tiaoalii Savea kind of takes that to another notch. Now, is he going to be the stat stuffer that a guy like Sweat and Murphy were in terms of what they could do in the pass rush? I don't think so. He wasn't an elite pass rusher for Arizona, only had 8 quarterback hurries on the year. But you talk about continuing to get teams in those third and long situations. I mean, how do you do that? You got to stop the run on first and second down. T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy did a phenomenal job of doing that for the Longhorns in 2023. I think Tiaoalii Savea is going to come in and help Texas continue that dominance, especially going into the SEC in 2024. Really excited about this getting again. It's going to be one that probably flies under the radar because it's not as flashy as bringing in Matthew Golden or Andrew Makuba or a guy like Isaiah Bond. But you talk about why Texas was special in 2023, why you think they're going to be special the next couple of years, what they're doing along the line of scrimmage, kind of that dirty work. That is what Texas is thriving in. I think Tiaoalii Savea, and I think I'm saying that name right, looked it up a few times, is certain. Apologies if I'm not. But that's what you want to bring for Texas heading into 2024. And you take a look at what they've done in the portal. And I kind of continue to bang the table, and we've had this conversation of how do you manage and use the transfer portal in this era of college football? And you're seeing some programs really just get aggressive in terms of overturning their whole entire roster heading into 2024. That's not really what Coach Sark in this Longhorns program is doing. They're bringing in transfers, but they're being really calculated, right? You look at a guy like Amari Neeblanc, very similar skill set to someone like JT Sanders, who's going to the NFL draft. You continue to scroll down, a guy like Silas Bolden, Isaiah Bond, and Matthew Golden, I mean, coming in as veteran wide receivers to replace the production of A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, and Jordan Whittington. And so you look at what Texas is losing, they're just kind of retooling, I guess you could say, in the transfer portal. And that's not to say guys like Jonte Cook and Ryan Wingo aren't going to be very good for Texas in 2024, because I certainly think they have a shot to be. But I think Coach Sark looks at, all right, first year going to the SEC, do we want to be relying on true freshmen and sophomores to be our primary pass catchers? If they go out and win jobs in camp, I mean, that means they're great. Like if you're beating out a guy like Matthew Golden or Silas Bolden or Isaiah Bond, that means you're really a guy that can play at the college football level. But you're not going in kind of having to solely rely on those guys. And then you take a look at some of the other additions in the portal. All right, we want to get some better pass rush off the edge. You go out and get a guy in Trey Moore who had 14 sacks, 16 tackles for a loss at UTSA last year. You want some veterans in the back end, because that was probably the leakier part of that Texas defense. You go out and grab a guy in Andrew Makuba, who probably would have been a day 2 pick in the NFL draft had he gone. You look at what Texas has done in the transfer portal, and they're kind of just plugging the holes that they had in this roster. All right, what are we losing? What do we need to replace? That's what they've done. And then where do we need to take that step? Guy like Andrew Makuba, certainly going to allow that Texas secondary to take that step. This was a very good team in 2023. It was going to be a very good team in 2024, but I think Coach Sark is using that transfer portal to largely kind of get over the hump. And we have this conversation a lot. When you're Texas, the margins are small, right? Winning a national championship, it is just getting 1% better. That's how close this Texas team was. And I think Coach Sark is using the transfer portal to find that 1-2% to get this team over the hump. Very, very excited for not only what they're returning, but what they are bringing to the table, or what they're getting in the transfer portal as well. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.